thin them out. You can't take them straight from the bottle and use them. You can do it, but it's going to be really deep, rich colors. You want to build it up. And that's what I'm going to kind of try to do here with my airbrush. I'll show you some of that. You can do it with an airbrush, you can do it with a brush. Same techniques, but with an airbrush you can get more control, I think. Yeah. Inks are very flowy and thin, while paints are viscous and thick. Inks are essentially a pigment that is dissolved into a solution that is water-like and thin. Kind of self-explanatory stuff. How many of you have used inks before? Good. On figures?
Yep.
Yeah, you can use inks on figures, of course. A lot of people are starting to use inks on airplanes, models, tanks. There's a couple colors that are popular to use, like soot, exhaust stains for airplanes. You can airbrush, get real effective stains with that. For tanks, you can change the hue of a tiger tank or whatever. Inks on top of an acrylic base will make that color change as much as you want it to or not. A slight glaze of inks over the top will get a slight change. If you want to completely change it, you can use a color, different color, or more layers of it. The one downfall with some inks, most inks, is they kind of dry glossy, so you kind of have to be careful with that. I usually mix the ink with a AK Ultra Matte. It's really good acrylic matte varnish.
Yeah.
So when I thin my inks, I'll put a little bit of that in the airbrush or in my pot or whatever I'm going to use to paint. And that helps matte the ink. If you're not afraid of giving a flat coat on your figure, then it's not that big of a deal. But, inks sometimes can be glossy. Some of them are better than others. But
Scott, do you have to seal them? You know, like with anything other than, you know, you say you use the AK to flatten them, but once the inks go down, do they rub off?
no,
They stay.
they're all acrylic inks.
Okay.
Yeah, it's nothing different than using acrylic paint, I would think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And if you have questions, just ask. This is going to be really informal. It's not that big of a deal. Just ask questions as we go. As far as the brands of inks, Scale Color 75 makes their line. These inks are really good because they do dry more matte than the other ones. I think they have 2 or 3 sets of various inks out there on the market. These are really good for any type of application, but they do dry more matte. Dollaroni, I got a bunch of these.
What's the name of that?
Which one?
What is it?
This one?
Yeah, what's the name of that ink?
Dollaroni
Dollar?
FW. I can pass them around if you guys
Yeah.
want to look.
Is that a map? You can find it on Michael's.
These are more glossy. These are more artist inks that you buy at Michael's or whatever.
They got a flat tip.
Yep. Yep.
For those, I think Michael's carries them.
Michael's.
Say, Scott,
Yes.
do you find
Like,
inks compared to acrylics or other paints, do you find them like less durable if you handle them?
Yes, I suppose. But
So you just have to be real careful.
You just have to be careful,
Because
yeah.
edges can get abraded off.
I mean, there was a question about that, but I mean, you just don't want to, be careful with them. It's not advisable to put like oil washes on top of them or enamel effect washes because you could screw them up a little bit.
I suppose you could put like a barrier or clear coat of
Yeah,
some
if
kind.
you did a
on
clear
it.
coat of some sort, an acrylic clear coat would be fine, or a lacquer coat. This is what effect, you asked what your mixing ratio is, it's just what effect you're looking for. I think it's better with an ink to go really thin and build it up than to go way too intense because you can't take it down. So it takes time to build up.
What's the best way to thin it?
Water. Yep. Water. Like I said, I use a little bit of Ultra Matte in it. Some people use Flow Improver. everyone has their own preference. Water's fine.
Your PSI kind of low, or is it?
For airbrushing, I always spray at about 15 pounds.
Scott, have you ever tried ammo shaders that are kind of like adhesive?
That's an acrylic ink, yeah.
Does it work the same way or is it a little
It's
different?
a different, I have a couple, I've tried them.
Do you like them as well as inks? or
They dry
not?
super glossy,
Okay.
that's what I've learned from them.
Is it like 23?
They're kind of similar. Everybody's coming out with the same thing, it's just who makes it, you know?
Private label.
Yeah,
There's one manufacturer and they slap their own damn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They all buy stuff.
The Dowler Ronnies that I was showing you guys, this is kind of an artist one. You can't, I mean, this isn't Mega Menace or this isn't AK or anything. This is a different kind that you buy at the art stores. There's another Liquitex brand. These are quite popular too. We can pass that around. So one of my primary go-to ones.
Scott, do you find a difference in the manufacturers? Like this is a better application, or are they pretty much all the same for what you're trying to do?
As far as these the kinds that have been passed around, they're kind of the same. I think these ones are geared towards figure painters, the scale 75 ones, because they dry more matte versus this.
Are these the ones you were looking at, like,
Yeah.
yesterday?
I don't know, Liquitex, I think I get it, Michael, I can't remember, but.
How is overlaying with multiple brands?
They're all really. Some of you guys paint with Citadel Games Workshop paints. They have their versions of inks too. They're called shades, or they came out with a contrast brand.
Contrast, yep.
Yeah, and don't use them, well, use them however you want to use them, but I would thin these with water
Oh,
just
you
as
want
much as
them
inks, because they're highly pigmented. And you can use these the same way you use any other inks I've been passing around.
How do they finish when they've dried?
They're semi-gloss.
Yeah, I mean, and if you build up more, it gets glossier and glossier. If
They're
you're not,
made for war game miniatures, so they're supposed to have like gloss.
if you're not afraid of flat coating your figure, it's not a problem, but I always try to never flat coat unless I have to. But
Is there anything in particular you would use for flat coating if you had to?
well, the acrylic AK Ultra Matte,
Okay.
that's my favorite. Everybody has their favorites, but
That's real good.
you talk to a lot of figure painters, this is a popular acrylic flat.
You put those right there, but you don't need it.
So you'll both mix it in and overcoat with it?
If I have to, yes.
Do you use it just exclusively for effects, or do you actually paint, like, say, if it's like a uniform, like a blue uniform, do you paint it black and then paint, start layering blue over top of it? Do you ever do that?
I use it for shading. I'll kind of show them. Yeah. I'll get into that, but I shoot underneath to get the shading. It's effective on camouflage.
Right.
Instead of having to paint the shades underneath, you can shoot underneath German camouflage and get the shades. And they come fluorescent, they come, you know, there's lots of colors, so. All right, these two figures here, I'll pass them around. For this particular figure, what I did with acrylics inks on this is, you can see, she's got a veil. It was kind of an experiment to try to paint that on a figure, but you gotta try to get the shadow of the veil on the skin and try to make that look real. So for this particular figure, you can see between the chest, a darker color, that was airbrushed. In the armpit area, that was an airbrushed ink. Different blends underneath, airbrushed ink. And then I would take a brush and paint the white folds and such. On the back of the figure, you can see there's a little, like, I don't know, is it crazy? I wanted to do a little OSL, so I shot a little bright orange on the back just to give it a little bit of an effect. But you can look at that, you can pass that one around.
Did you airbrush the ink on that one?
Yep.
You did? Okay.
We'll start with this one. The marine that I painted, this is an example that I use for, well, his uniform is a camouflage, but I wanted to have the zenithal light where the highlight is up here and the darkness or shade underneath. So I shot inks underneath from below, and you can see how it kind of goes into the folds and kind of naturally lays out. So I did that around the figure. You can look at that.
If you shot it from the upper part, would that have ruined the effect?
Yeah, I mean, you would have to use a color, a corresponding color. For this, I used burnt umber, a brown or a dark brown, to get the shading. It's hard to get an acrylic ink higher than the color. You can always go lower than the base color. That makes sense? This uniform is green. I can't really airbrush it a brighter green on the top. With an ink, it's kind of hard. So, but below, you can shade the uniform.
And you said you're cutting the ink with water.
Water. A little bit of, people, it's good to experiment. Use flow improver, a couple drops of that. Use an AK Ultra matte, or of whatever matte you use, an acrylic matte, you can mix that into it as well. Helps with the flow. I just advise experimenting. It's taken a long time to get how it works for me, and that's what I've been doing, so.
Do you ever mix inks
With acrylics?
with acrylics?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's a good question. I should have brought that up. Yeah. Let's say you have a red acrylic paint, Vallejo or whatever brand, and it's not very vibrant. Put a couple drops of the red ink in it, and it'll really make it pop. For whites, there's not a lot of acrylic whites that are real good for covering. If you put a white, I don't have a white ink with me here, but if you put a couple drops of white ink in your mix, that'll make white cover a lot better.
You do that with a brush and one, or just an airbrush?
Both.
Does that work with yellows too?
Yep.
Okay.
There's some colors in acrylics, especially some brands that don't cover very well. Whites are really hard. Scale 75 white is terrible. It doesn't cover very well. So you can mix some white ink into that, and it would cover a lot better if you want to have that effect. But if you're painting a uniform and you want a vibrant red, you can mix red ink into it.
Is there less airbrush clogging than with acrylic?
It's got good flow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Underneath, it just kind of flows to the shadows. And if you really, I mean, there's a lot of brush that I do as well after it, because I may need to clean up some of the folds.
Sure.
I'm just saying, this is what I do, so.
Two questions, Scott.
Yep.
Number one, what's your go-to airbrush?
What do I got? To me, a HP something.
Oh,
I've had it for 20 some years. I want to get a new one eventually. I can't read it anymore. To me, an airbrush.
it's just a double action
Yeah,
internal?
it's a double action. Yep. Yep.
What size of a needle does that have in it?
I think that's got a 0.4, is that what it is? 0.04, 0.4.
They use a, I bought it with a 0.24, 0.25, and with the inks, it's really fine.
Yeah.
Nice. It
Yeah.
works really well.
That's I don't have any other needle, that's the only needle I got, so. Eventually I wanna get a better airbrush, but that's another story. With the wife. All right. Oh, what else do I got? So you're looking at the figures. That's an example of where I use acrylic inks for making things go quicker. But, got it going? No. That's okay, that's fine.
That's why I'm running, I can't figure out.
Don't worry about it, Pat, that's fine.
I can film you.
Oh, don't film me, please.
I guess we're gonna have to go in over.
That's fine.
Sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. So I'll start throwing some paint, or I'm sorry, some inks on a figure that I just kind of painted real quick this week to show some techniques with. Is there any other questions on the figures there, or anything else on inks before we kind of do a little show and tell? All right, here we go.
That would come up far, pass it around.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll pass it. Okay. So just so you can see, I just kind of threw some flesh tones on this bust, painted the metallics. It's really rough, but I just want to show some tricks and techniques I can do with that. So the flesh tones are very basic. And then we'll try to make some magic happen. Pretty basic, pretty basic. Yep. Not much to it. That's all acrylics right there so far. Just a little bit of white over the entire flesh, just to kind of blend in the body. Obviously, there's going to be shadows. Just how I airbrushed it. Thank you. You can see that there's some natural shadows from it, but I want to emphasize those shadows because I want the zenithal highlight to be very bright up here and more shadow down there. So I'm going to airbrush some inks underneath his chest, the rib cage or whatever you want to call it. We'll see how it works. Flesh tones, you know, you can be as funny as you want to be with colors. My go-to is probably a burnt umber ink or a darker brown ink, maybe with a little red, but I'm not going to get too crazy here. I'm just going to probably shoot a little burnt umber underneath it.
Oh, shit. You should be available.
For $49.99.
Better make sure Scott gets a cut of that though.
I think 0.001%.
And then there'll be the director's cut. Yeah.
I put little, not steel, but stainless steel washers or nuts in these just to make sure you shake them up. Obviously the pigments can settle, so you want to make sure you shake them up pretty good. I always put them in my paints as well, just stainless steel nuts. And they usually come with this type and this type come with an eyedropper. The other ones are squeeze bottles. That kind of stuff. Now, another important thing. Every ink, like if you're familiar with oil paints have opacity, they have a translucency, there's a semi, what is it called, Mike? Semi-transparent.
Yeah.
Same with inks. There's inks that are transparent, there's inks that are semi-transparent, and there's inks that are opaque. You're thinning it down quite a bit, but you're not going to get the covering power with a transparent ink versus a semi-transparent ink. Now, the brand name ones like Scale 75 are all the same. I don't think there's going to be any difference there, but that's just something to keep in mind. And on each ink, like on an oil paint, you're going to see that version or what it is stamped on or printed on the label. So, for example, I'm going to use Daleroni, the burnt umber, and this one's semi-transparent. So it's not opaque and it's not completely transparent. Just by looking at it, you can see that it's much more thicker, not thicker I should say, but much more opaque than this one. You can see that one clears up pretty well in the glass. You can see that this is an official transparent one. All right, water.
think this has to be sometimes taken into consideration too, Scott. The transparent ones, if you put them, your figure in direct sunlight, they
Yeah.
will fade quick.
Yeah,
So you gotta be careful of that.
yep.
They're not archival.
Oh, no, for sure. Yep. So I got a little bit of water in the cup. Generally, I'll mix this in another little cup and then pour it in. I don't like mixing in my airbrush. Some people do. It's not something I like to do. But for demo purposes, I'll just do it right here. 1 drop of the matte improver, or the matte varnish. And we'll take a little bit of the ink. Always test it out on a sheet or a paper towel or your hand. So you can kind of see, this may be even a little, I sprayed this part here. That may be a little too opaque or a little too heavy for me. So I'm going to fit in with a little bit more water. Everybody see that? It's a personal way of doing it, however you want to do it, experiment, but to me that's a little bit too much. So I'm going to add a little bit more water to the cup.
Is there a reason why you generally don't mix in the cup?
Well, I think I like to mix outside of it, because sometimes you can get your acrylic paints or your inks clogged up into it. Right? I don't. It's this way I do things.
Personal preference.
Personal preference.
Yeah.
Artistic license.
How much do you thin that? I mean, you.
I took, right now the water level is about half of the cup. I put a drop of matte varnish in it, and I took, just a little bit of a brush full of that ink and mixed it in. It's another question you get asked is, what percent of water, what percent of this, what percent of ink? I don't know. You just got to try it. It's hard to say.
Depends on the colors too. Yellow's
Depends on-
gonna be lighter than the
Yeah,
red.
and the transparency or the opacity of the ink as well. So that's a big part of it. Yeah. It's a little bit lighter. I'm gonna go with it. Where'd he go? Over here. Well, this is just like my desk at home. So now I'm going to hold the figure this way. I'm going to attempt to just airbrush the shadows underneath his chest, on the rib cage, maybe into the armpits. The way I painted this figure is not the way I would typically paint a figure, because I wouldn't paint the leather right now. I do the flesh first. So bear in mind that that's kind of what happens. Because now when I airbrush the deep part of his armpit, I'm going to be airbrushing the leather strap. I wouldn't paint that leather strap until I was done with the flesh tones. I wouldn't paint the shield or the armor on his other shoulder unless I was done with the flesh tones. But yeah, let it dry a little bit. Whole key with using these inks is to take your time. Don't flood it on, and take your time putting it on, because you can just be daydreaming and doing this 10 times, but then you realize you're looking at it and now it's completely brown, and you don't want that. What you want the ink to do is to stain that flesh tone down there at the shadow part, for the shades. I'll do a little underneath his chin too. So for the front, I'm going to airbrush his chest. On the back, I'll brush paint it so you can kind of see the difference. I mean, not the difference, but you can do it both ways. Sorry, this is so exciting.
It's like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
It's like none of us had to wait for paint to dry.
Right.
So I've got the hair dryer nearby, the crack pot.
So you must not use oils.
Hey Scott,
Yes.
now when you mix these inks, do you ever use a fluoride or a retarder with them? Like,
You can. I don't really. It's water.
so you don't get any real tip dry with that?
No, it's so thin. Yeah. And I think this Ultra Matte kind of helps with that too. It helps the flow of the paint or the pigment. But I don't. Try it out.
Do you ever use it to transition between like light and, like if you have if you brushed on your shadows, like maybe 3 levels of shadow, do you ever use it to transition those shadows?
With the inks?
Yeah. Have you ever tried that? Or?
You can. Yeah. I mean, on a bigger figure, I may take a darker ink or a darker version of the burnt umber and go lower in the body and hit that till, because it'll be darker down here. You can. But I think I'll pass this around, or at least I'll have you guys look at it. You can kind of see what, this is kind of, I don't know if I'm done with this yet or not, but I'm going to just go with it because we got to get through this. But you can kind of see what I've done. Well, that didn't stand up. You kind of see what I've done with that part of the chest. Subtle. And if you want to go heavier, you can build it up. That's the key. If you want to go heavier, you can build it up.
When you're drying with the hair dryer, is it at a low setting, or?
Yeah.
Not hot?
Okay, just one sec. Hold on to it. That's up to you.
I'm Mr. Butterfingers.
Don't lick it.
Tastes like ink.
So this is, it's a personal preference, how you want to do it. That's just a quick way of doing the flesh tone. I don't know if I'm done with it, I have to think about it, but you can kind of see just at the front there underneath his chest, kind of gave a nice shadow, nice effect.
Then would you use a lighter color then for the highlights?
No.
You don't use it?
It's hard to go higher than whatever color it is in ink. I don't know, people may be able to do it, it's hard, I think.
Lighting's the only thing that I found that can really go up in value.
And I don't want to put light on that, so. So you can see that, I mean, it's how, I would probably go a little bit more, but I don't know.
What if you go too far? How do you bring it
Well,
back?
you're kind of screwed.
Go back to that, start over?
Yeah.
Go back to go, like 200, start over.
Well, you may just have to do the flesh tones again, but that's why I was saying, take it slow, let it dry, take it slow, hit it again, let it dry. Go to the bathroom, take a break, whatever, look at it again, take it slow, layer by layer, slow layer by layer, because you can really go too fast. I've done it before, I'm not paying attention, I'm watching the ball game, and somebody got, it's way too dark, and I gotta take it back and yeah. The more, not as it dries, but the more layers you put on top of it. I think so.
I like blue.
Amazing what it changes that.
It tastes like coffee.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a quick way to do shadow.
My favorite way of coffee is an alcohol.
And I don't know where the marine bust is, but you can kind of, that's not camouflage shirt, but, you know, we've all painted, I think I've done the airbrush on the back of the helmet there, the helmet cover for shading, but it's good because you don't wipe away all the details that you did with the camouflage. So just pretend that he's wearing a German tunic in World War II, and he's got the oak leaf pattern. You're not gonna wipe away all the detail you did with that by airbrushing a little bit of whatever color is the shadow.
What color ink did you use?
Burnt umber.
Burnt umber.
You know, you don't have to use green or blue or pink, but
Oil paints for
you could mix a little red. You can make plenty of red. You can mix red into it.
Make it a little bit.
Yeah, it's fun. them all equally, you know?
Was your base color any ones too?
No, those are all
acrylic.
With your flash, how do you mix your own flash colors or?
Yeah, I use like, heavy body acrylics. Kind of what Jim Rice, if you remember Jim Rice's class, he uses, heavy body steel 75 acrylics. But I get the Liquitex stuff. It's another class in itself, but yeah, I mix that up.
So your base color is pretty much your lightest you're gonna go, is that what you're saying?
No,
It's a mid-tone, still mid-tone?
I would have, that's just a scrap, quick paint for flesh. I would have the flesh, at least the highlights ties on, I would pretty much be done with the flesh tone. And then I would take the shades into the underneath.
Gotcha.
So this is kind of your finishing step? This is your finishing step right here to it?
Yeah, it's finishing stuff, that's a good way to put it. After my flesh tones are completely finished.
Scott, on, you said blue, you use heavy acrylic, you run it through there,
No, brush painting. Yeah. Yeah, you could, but, yeah.
That's gonna have to be taken down with water or.
You thin with water. Liquitex makes heavy body gold and makes heavy body acrylic. Everybody, there's a lot of them open, no? I like to mix my own flesh tones with me. You want to, it's another subject, like if you want to paint, I want to paint flesh tones different all the time. I don't want the same flesh tones for the female in the World War II guy in Pacific War and the guy in the Siberian desert, whatever. I want flesh tones to be different, but.
On that, white veil, did you dust it with white ink or white acrylic?
I think it was really thin white ink, maybe with a touch of gray, if I remember right. Just to kind of cover the flesh tones.
Right.
But the deep parts, like I was explaining, the deep parts underneath the arms, in the chest, I think it was a gray ink, if I remember right. I never write notes of what I do, so it's hard to remember. Exciting stuff.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's just another tool you can do. I mean, I think what's important with figure painting or any type of modeling, you just take bits and pieces from everything you've seen, what everybody says, what you learned. So this is what I do. I really kind of like the way I do it with the inks. Maybe 2 years from now it'll be different, I don't know, but it's what I've been using, so.
If you were to do like a black robe, and so you've got like probably different shades of gray, and would you start probably with just that lighter shade of gray and then start building up with the black and whatever else?
Yeah. I think if you want to have a black robe, you don't want to mix white into it, because then it turns gray. As far as acrylic colors go, you want to use flesh tone color to mix into the gray, or to the black, or the dark gray. Gives you a better highlight than white with gray, or dark gray or black or whatever.
Okay.
Little yellow kind of light. Yeah. If you're doing oil paints, it's a different story. Fair. So that part in the front was airbrush. I'm just going to show you that you can do it. If you don't want to do it as an airbrush, you can use a brush as well. So I have my handy dandy palette here. I can show you that. The airbrush, yeah. I think, the airbrush is a lot more subtle. Yeah, it's sometimes hard to get into the airbrush, or get into areas with the airbrush, so. If I were to if I brush paint, I probably would thin the ink a lot more and build it up.
So when you thin that ink down, you turn your pressure way down on your airbrush, right?
It's probably still the same as I use for airbrushing acrylics, 15 pounds. I didn't turn it down.
What do you use? What airbrush do you use?
The airbrush is just to me, a HP something or another. It's a double action airbrush.
Like the pressure.
Oh, I think it's 15 pounds PSI.
Did you use any inks on your Wildcat?
Yeah. Yeah. Where the wings go into the body of the airplane. There's a little bit of a dark staining.
Yeah, from
Where the
exhaust,
crew maybe
yeah.
climbed aboard and
Yeah.
so I airbrushed maybe the burnt umber, brown, maybe black there in the panel lines.
Yeah, I never thought about using.
A couple good colors for like exhaust staining on airplane is airplanes is carbon black and burnt sienna, I think it is. Yeah. Carbon black and burnt sienna combined give a real good exhaust staining on an airplane.
Scott, did you clean your airbrush or is it still sitting?
Still sitting.
Is it okay?
We'll find out.
It's a surprise.
Well, you just go home and say, honey, I broke my airbrush.
What's that?
Go home and say, honey, I broke my airbrush.
Well, no, I'll clean it before. Yeah, no.
Well, there's a reason to get a new airbrush right there.
Exactly. I got Windex, so that cleans a lot.
Honey, I need a new airbrush, really.
So, like going back what I was saying, that it's up to you how far you want to go with that. You know, you can keep going. You want darker eye. Personal preference. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I think I may want to go a little bit darker, but we're just going to leave it at that. But
You could always do that with the brush if you go deeper, right? I mean, you don't have to load the airbrush again, but you can take a brush and
yep,
just
100%. Because you're using such thin amounts when you're brushing, and I'll show you that. You can really feather it out. Add more water to your brush and feather it out like a watercolor. Actually, I'm just going to use the water here. That's pretty thin. Now I'm going to do the back side of his body. Underneath the leather strap, I guess. And if you kind of want to do this on a wet palette, if you got a wet palette, so you can keep it wet longer. But it's so thin. It's hard to show, but it's so thin. It's kind of it's hard to show. It's really thin. So it's almost a stain. And you got time to play with it. It doesn't dry that fast, but if you need to move it around, you can use water and stipple it in. Move it back and forth. Maybe I need a little bit more ink in it. You don't want to load the brush up too much. Just like when you're painting with acrylics, you kind of want to have it thinner on the brush. It's not an immediate gratification, satisfaction. It takes time.
Do you use this on 1/35 figures?
You can, yeah. Why not? For sure. It's probably a really effective way to do camouflage on 35th scale. The shadow part, anyway. Yeah. I know this is so exciting. I'm sorry.
It's like watching Michelangelo.
Yeah, right.
Sistine Chapel.
Yeah.
He's dead or not.
And it's really subtle there, so I'm gonna add more ink. It's just it's a game kind of, like you got to try to see how much you can use. But you never want to go heavy. I can't emphasize that enough. You don't want to go heavy with the inks. You don't want to use the full opacity of whatever brand it is because it'll go really haywire. You want to just build it up slowly. I'm taking water, getting the ink off the brush, but then I'm kind of smoothing it out. Because it's kind of like watercolor, you can do that. Once you get it dry, it stays, and then you can build up on that.
Does the ink dry faster when acrylic paint, or is it
Probably the same.
same?
Yeah.
Could you paint a whole figure with inks?
If you did an undercoat, if you did the gray scale or you did something, you could, sure. I think they make a flesh colored ink, but I wouldn't advise that, but I'm sure you could. I just use it to emphasize and to change color, to shade things, I guess. Like I said before too, the flesh tones would be completely done. This would just help the shadow or the shading of it. Subtle again, I'm just gonna walk by, show you guys. It's subtle, it's still dry, or it's still wet. Actually, you can see a lot of red underneath the belt strap, but subtle, subtle, subtle. You build it up, build it up. With the brush, you get more control than with an airbrush. With an airbrush, you can kind of pile it on faster.
And show the front and then the back.
Would you do that then to also emphasize the musculature of the figure then?
Yeah, I would do more work underneath his chin, underneath the helmet.
The arm there?
Yeah, but we're just doing it this way here, so. Subtle, subtle, subtle. And I would have to go a lot more on top of that, I think anyway, so. You can see how quick I covered with the front, with the airbrush versus the back. I mean, I only worked on it for what, 3 minutes, but with the brush on the back, I would go a lot more on it. Sorry. Mike?
Underneath the belt.
Yep. Yeah, the crook of the back, underneath the armpit on the backside.
Difference between stippling and feathering.
You can stipple it, but because it's it's an ink, you can feather it out. Thin your brush, feather it out. Thin your brush, feather it out.
Water, reduce the paint.
Yep.
Feathering.
Yep. Make the color or the thick or the solution on your palette. Brush it on. Then take your brush and stick it in a cup of water. Get most of the water off, and then you can feather it out. It doesn't dry instantaneously. It's like an acrylic. You got some time. You can feather it out.
Do you ever shade on the metallics?
Yep. You can.
Straps.
Yeah, it goes by fast, right?
All right. Well, it's going by too fast. Okay. Just for sake of everything, I'm gonna do, there was a question on shading the metallics. So that's why I painted his shoulder, whatever shield, that type of metal. That color of metal, I should say. What I'm gonna do is take an airbrush and I'm gonna try to attempt some OSL with that shoulder. OSL is object source lighting. Go out there and you'll see a lot of figures that have it. That's where you force light on some side of the figure. With a fluorescent color, with a candle light, with a fire, with a light bulb, whatever. When you see those out, you'll see them out in the show. It's called OSL, it's object source lighting. So I'm gonna force that, we'll pick red or something, and I'll kind of show you how I do the OSL on this. But first, when you do OSL, you want the base to kind of be a darker color because you want that effect to be more dramatic. It's not going to be realistic for this figure, but for example, I'm just going to use it. So let's just use black for the. I'm going to take I'm going to airbrush the lower part of that shield and kind of just shadow it so the OSL is a little bit higher. It'll make sense, believe me. Yeah, otherwise I got this stuff too. I brought Windex too. Windex is a universal cleaner for acrylics. I think I like using it for everything. All right. Water. AK Ultramat. Again, a little bit of water, just a drop of the AK Ultramat. Actually, I have some on my palette here. Mix that in. Then a touch of the black. My brush sucked up a lot. I don't want that much in there. Dab it off on your paper towel. Maybe too black. It's not too bad. So that's my airbrush consistency there. Once again, I'm going to airbrush from below to get a shadow on that shield, or the shoulder shield, or whatever you want to call it. Help me fall off. This could take a little while because another thing too is the metallics are glossy, so it takes a little bit of while because it takes a little bit more to build it up. Yeah, this could take a long time. You all got dinner reservations?
Midnight.
Sorry.
Better to take your time and do it right than screw us all up.
I know, but we're getting pretty close to the end of the time here. I thought this would be half an hour now. Didn't think I ever talked so much.
Let me see the result. But that's part of it.
Yeah, this is going to take a while to put the shadow on that. Probably should have thought that through, but I think I can still do the OSL with it. That's kind of what I wanted to show, that part of it too. So.
That offset spraying that you're doing there, is it the same thing we were talking about last night when Rick was talking about doing it for flats?
Yeah. Yeah, shooting.
So
Yep.
find that and go over the light sources?
Yep. Yep. To start a figure of bust, I'll always paint it dark and then take it in high deck tan or some flesh tone color so I can see where the highlights are going to lay on the figure. That's kind of what he did, what he talked about. He does with his flats, or did with his flats. Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of skip that, but you can kind of see, I'm not gonna pass it around, but that got dark on the lower part of the shield, or the arm shield. And I'm gonna show you the trick that I use for OSL, because
Put it up next to the camera.
that's the most important thing. Once again, for OSL, object source lighting, you want to kind of do it on a darker surface to be more dramatic. If you're painting a Viking next to a campfire, you're painting a Napoleonic figure next to a candle, or whatever it is, you want the object source lighting, you want it to be darker underneath, kind of to show that effect, I think. And that's what I think anyway. And you can kind of see, this is a darker version of whatever metal paint I used. But to get that pop effect, I'm going to use some white acrylic paint. And I'm going to airbrush underneath that metal shield. And that's going to pop everything white that I want the light to show from. That make sense? When you see it all together, I think it'll make sense.
So you're gonna use the white to highlight the places that you're gonna wanna accentuate.
Because whatever color I go on top of, that white is gonna be the base color, and that's gonna pop that OSL.
And that's coming from the top.
Top if you want, the side if you want. I'm gonna do it from underneath. I'm just gonna, let's just pretend he's standing next to a campfire in the right here. And the OSL is going to be right on this side of his body. Now I would do much more different things with the face and the flesh tones and whatever, but for this example, I'm just going to try to show that on the shield. Too bad this is, I mean, I'm doing it really fast just to get the point across, but I'm gonna actually shoot a little bit underneath this chest here too, so you can kind of see how it looks, where I did the burnt umber before. I'm really doing this fast, but it's not the perfect example, but I thought this would be good because there's a face sculpt on that. And it's kind of a good thing to do the OSL on so you can kind of see it. But I may even go hit some hot spots, I call it, with my brush with some white. I always do everything in layers, even with the airbrushing acrylics on an airplane or a tank. I don't want to flood paint on, so to me it takes a long time to get an effect if I'm airbrushing. Yeah, that's fast, but we'll just use it.
You wanna put it up to the...
Yeah. Let me do a little brush painting on it too. So I know you can't see it, but I airbrushed white, just plain old whatever white, from an angle like this on this shoulder armor. It's really subtle. I would take more time and try to get more on there, but I don't have a lot of time. But I'm trying to show an OSL here, so I'm going to take a brush with a little bit of the white paint. I'm going to kind of just hit hot spots on this sculpt where I want the OSL to really kind of show. It's going to be underneath the chin of the face, underneath the nose. This is fast, so.
You
said you're using white ink.
Nope, this is white acrylic paint. This is white acrylic paint. Just regular Vallejo white acrylic paint.
Series 7?
Just Vallejo stuff.
No, the brush.
Yeah, I think it is. Yep. This is kind of a hack job, but I'm just trying to show it here.
Do you ever like shine a flashlight on it to see how the light would actually hit on something?
Yeah, a lot of, yep, quite often, yep. It's hard to see, but you can kind of see where I really emphasize the white on the armor. I'm just gonna go real quick with this and show you guys. It's fast, believe me. This is not, it's quick. I airbrushed white underneath, white acrylic. Now I hit with a brush, just some hot spots I want to have, because you'll see how it comes together when I airbrush the OSL on it. This is fast. It's not, I take more time if I have time, so.
No, that same technique, you can use it with a non-metallic paint scheme where you use different gradients of grays and whites and blues. That's what I'm kind of playing with.
Just quick. I'm trying to just be quick. It's not take more time and try to detail the face a little bit more. Probably airbrush, a little bit more white underneath it. Keep that emphasis.
Scott, do you do inks as a wash?
You could, yeah.
You don't want to.
Like for armor, you mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
Panel lines?
You could. Problem with this is it dries quick.
So it's hard to control?
Hard to control. Well, it's not hard to control. Well, usually with a wash, you want to kind of feather the overflow or the tide marks away.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of time with acrylics.
Even with the retarder.
Yeah, there may be a little bit more with the retarder, but I just go with, I just keep doing the enamels or an oil wash for me. All right, so we got the foundation for the OSL. Let's do orange. Let's say he's standing next to a campfire. This is transparent orange flame, it's called.
What a fitting color.
What?
Fitting color,
Yeah.
orange flame.
That would just look so cool, like an old military or something. That color.
Oh, gotta clean that out.
Two flames on the front.
Like some road warrior.
Yeah. Here you go.
Oh, you ever got that painting for it out there? That painting?
And this will be the last thing, I promise you.
That's what you always say.
I want to make sure I get that white out so I don't contaminate the orange, but sorry. Now, if I had two airbrushes, I could do it.
Here's another honey, I need a second.
Alright, that's gonna work. Water. I'll just say it again, a little bit of water, a little bit of 8K Ultra Matte. That's what I go to. You guys can use whatever you want to use, but
That's good stuff.
I like it, yeah.
It's really flat.
It gets things flattened and it flattens the inks a little bit too, so. And I have a little dollop of flame orange on the palette. This I may want to go a little higher. I mean a little bit more intense, I should say. So I may add a little bit more flame and orange in it. Always test it out on a paper towel. You can kind of see up here the intensity of the ink that I'm using. This is really fast. I think it would be more dramatic if I were able to get more of a shadow underneath or on the lower part of this armor, or the shoulder armor, but I would still be spraying the black probably. At that point, maybe, you know, I would go with an acrylic instead of an ink, if it would take me 3 hours to do it, you know? It's
Just to get that higher opacity.
yeah, if I want to have a shade or darker shade, you just go with the way it goes. But somebody told me a long time ago, doing OSL, you always want to have whatever OSL you're applying to the figure less intense than whatever the object is that's putting the light out. So if you're next to a campfire that's that bright, you want to have the OSL be less intense. You can't have that be as intense as a fire because you're not standing on the fire, next to the fire. So quick, easy, not perfect. I'm just showing you how to do it. It's just fast. So I'm a little embarrassed, but that's what it is.
Yeah, we're all judging you.
Yeah.
Wait till our next meeting.
It's just a fast way. I'm doing it as quick as I can.
That's terrible. Just because y'all got coming in.
And you can use fluorescent green or whatever. You pick the color. You can pick the color. I use this yellow orange color. I can go higher intensity if I wanted to. You can see where the white was. And you can see how that stained it.
Is that what you want? You want the white to show a little?
Yeah, well, not to show, but I want that to be the highest part of the OSL. I would take a lot more time.
It's a shame our club always leads with its weakest.
That's really pretty. We're calling you the Bovie Statue of Liberty.
Oh, okay. I already got you. Spotlight hog.
Then the phone throw.
That is so cool.
It's all about Scott.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I don't know.
So that's supposed to be going to reflection.
yeah.
These kids talking about it, so I'll get that free.
I don't talk, that's what your shows for you.
It is. It's awesome. Definitely get an idea of it.
Yeah, as long as you can see how it, this isn't the perfect way to do it, as long as you can kind of see how I did it. You can refine it. I would take more time, and you can refine it. No, the question is, let's say I wanted to, no, I got a little bit of that orange on his face, which is kind of an amateur mistake, but anyway, I wouldn't do it that way, but let's say I wanted to have a OSL effect on the side of the face as well. I would take that burnt umber and kind of, well, I would. I mean, I would shade that face or this side of the figure darker. And then I would also take maybe highlights of the flesh and stipple where the hair, the beard is, high points of that, maybe the nostril, various parts of the face, and then I would take that, I would stipple it white, just like I did on the armor. Then I would take that same acrylic ink and airbrush that.
The skin too.
And then you would get that OSL effect on his face.
How do you correct accidentally hitting his face? Brush the flush again?
Yeah, you just be more careful.
Oh.
Maybe I would just paper the all around with a little bit of that.
You can just rebase it after it happens. You're not that far across.
I'm just trying to do it, yeah, I'd probably just cover with paper towel. That makes sense? This is not a perfect example, I'm just kind of showing you how I did it. But there's a lot of applications for inks. So.
Very cool.
Not just figures, but like I said before, tanks and airplanes too. Yeah, I hope I helped a little bit. Just take it home and try it. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.